Hey everyone, welcome back, ready to explore something new. This time we're diving into epigenetics and how it relates to cancer.
Sounds intense.
It is, but also super fascinating, you know. You sent over some really interesting research by a Dr. F. Cardona.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
Looks like he's got a whole system, a different way of looking at cancer and how we can um, influence it.
Influence it, huh?
Yeah.
That's a bold claim.
Well, that's what we're here to unpack, right? We've got excerpts from a few of his publications, Casual Therapy of Cancer,
Huh.
Centro Médico Cardona Epigenética y Salud, and one just titled Dr. Cardona.
So a real deep dive into his theories.
Exactly. And basically what we want to understand is, can things like our diet or stress levels really impact our genes?
And could that then impact cancer development?
Exactly. So let's start with the basics. You know, we inherit our genes, right? That's our blueprint.
Or DNA, yeah.
But what Dr. Cardona is saying is, it's not just about the genes themselves, it's how they're expressed.
So that's where epigenetics comes in. This idea that the environment can actually influence how our genes behave.
Okay, so break that down for me. What's the difference between genetics and epigenetics?
Think of it this way. Your DNA, your genes, are like the hardware of a computer.
Okay, I'm following.
The epigenome, these molecules that control gene expression, are like the software. They tell the hardware what to do.
So the software determines which genes are turned on or off.
Exactly. And that's where it gets really interesting because Dr. Cardona suggests that we have a lot more control over this software than we think.
Okay, so you're saying our lifestyle choices can actually override our genetic predisposition? I mean, come on. How much power do we really have?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
But think about it. Even something as simple as getting sunburned shows how the environment can directly impact our genes.
Right. UV radiation, it triggers a response in our skin.
Exactly. And Dr. Cardona takes it a step further. He believes that things like what we eat, the toxins we're exposed to, our stress levels, even our thoughts and emotions can all influence our epigenome.
Wow. So he's basically saying we're not just victims of our genes, we have a say in how they behave.
Absolutely. He's emphasizing the power of lifestyle choices.
Mhm.
And he's particularly concerned about the impact of diet.
I was just getting to that. He's got some pretty strong warnings about processed foods, right?
He does. He argues that they're often lacking in essential nutrients and can be high in substances that disrupt our cellular processes.
But he also goes beyond that. He even talks about how overheating food can create carcinogenic molecules.
It's fascinating. He dives into how certain cooking methods, especially at high temperatures, can alter the chemical structure of food.
Like when you char meat on the grill, right? I've heard that can create those harmful compounds.
Exactly. He specifically mentions heterocyclic amines, which have been linked to cancer.
So it's not just burnt toast we should be worried about.
Right. It's about being more mindful of how we prepare our food. And on the flip side, Dr. Cardona is a huge advocate for organic foods.
That makes sense. Fewer pesticides.
Exactly. He believes that pesticides can actually trigger epigenetic modifications that increase cancer risk.
So it's not just about the nutritional value of organic food, but also reducing exposure to these potential epigenetic disruptors.
Yet his argument.
Yeah.
And he doesn't stop at diet. He points to a whole range of external factors: toxins, electromagnetic radiation, how much we exercise, our sleep, even our mental state.
Wow, so it really is a whole body approach. But how do all these external factors actually lead to cancer? I mean, what's the mechanism?
He talks about creating biochemical imbalances in the body. It's like a cascade effect.
Okay, give me an example.
Let's say you have a diet that's lacking in certain nutrients. That could lead to something called oxidative stress.
Oxidative stress.
It's basically an imbalance of free radicals in the body, and that can fuel inflammation.
Right, and chronic inflammation is linked to a whole host of diseases, including cancer.
Exactly. So you can see how these things start to connect. But it's not just diet. Things like exposure to toxins or chronic stress can also contribute to these imbalances.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture. So all these external factors can create an environment within the body that's more susceptible to cancer.
That's the idea. And Dr. Cardona's approach is all about addressing those root causes, not just treating the symptoms.
So it's about creating an environment where cancer is less likely to develop in the first place.
Exactly. He calls it the Dr. Cardona custom method.
And what does that involve? What's his secret sauce?
It's a multi-pronged approach that includes optimizing nutrition through diet and supplements, reducing exposure to toxins, getting regular exercise, and managing stress.
So it's about making those lifestyle changes that can shift the balance in our favor. But does he believe this can actually reverse the effects of unhealthy habits? I mean, is it really possible to undo the damage?
That's a great question, and one that researchers are still exploring. But the idea is that by adopting healthier habits, we're sending signals to our cells, encouraging them to function in a way that's more conducive to health.
So it's like we're constantly communicating with our genes through our choices.
Exactly. And those choices have the power to influence our health outcomes.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it. But before we go any further, I want to make sure our listeners understand that while we're exploring Dr. Cardona's research, it's essential to do your own research and consult with your healthcare providers.
Couldn't agree more. We're just here to provide information and spark curiosity, but ultimately, your health decisions are your own.
All right, with that disclaimer out of the way, let's dive into the specifics of Dr. Cardona's method. He's a big believer in the power of a basic breakfast, right?
He is. He emphasizes giving the body nutrients without overwhelming the digestive system first thing in the morning.
Interesting. So it's about starting the day off right, setting the tone for a healthy metabolism.
That's the idea. And he's also quite specific about certain types of fats. He cautions against high oleic acid intake and too much linoleic acid, which are found in many vegetable oils.
So he's saying not all fats are created equal.
Right. He believes those particular fats can contribute to inflammation.
And on the flip side, he's a big proponent of coconut oil and goat or sheep dairy, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He likes those because they contain medium-chain saturated fatty acids, or AGSCMs.
AGSEMs, those are the good guys.
He argues that the body uses them differently than other types of saturated fat.
Hold on, so he's saying saturated fat isn't always the enemy. This goes against everything I thought I knew about nutrition.
Well, that's why we're here, to challenge those assumptions. And it's not just about the fats themselves, it's about balance. Dr. Cardona also emphasizes the importance of probiotics and fiber.
Ah, the gut microbiome. I knew that was coming. Seems like everything comes back to gut health these days.
And for good reason. A healthy gut microbiome plays a key role in managing inflammation and supporting the immune system.
So, Dr. Cardona's basic diet is all about providing the building blocks for a healthy gut.
Precisely. It focuses on whole, unprocessed foods with an emphasis on fiber-rich vegetables, fermented foods for probiotics, and lean protein sources.
It sounds like a balanced approach, not too restrictive, but we'll have to save the details of that diet for another time. For now, I think we've laid a pretty solid foundation for understanding Dr. Cardona's approach to cancer. What do you think?
I think so. We've covered a lot of ground, but it's clear that Dr. Cardona is presenting a unique perspective that challenges conventional thinking. And whether or not you agree with all of his ideas, it's certainly food for thought.
It definitely is. And we'll be exploring those ideas even further in our next episode, where we'll delve deeper into the specifics of his 10 daily habits and the science behind them.
So stay tuned, folks. This deep dive is just getting started.
So we're talking about things like eating organic to minimize our pesticide exposure, choosing those cooking methods that don't create so many of those harmful compounds. But what about those toxins we just can't avoid? What's Dr. Cardona's take on that?
Well, he really pushes for what he calls a clean lifestyle. Minimizing our exposure to as many environmental toxins as possible.
Oh, okay, but how? How do you even start to do that?
It can be things like choosing natural cleaning products or filtering your water, even being mindful of the materials in your home.
So you're saying we need to create a bubble around ourselves, avoid everything potentially toxic. That's not really realistic, is it?
Not entirely, no, but we can definitely make choices to reduce our exposure.
Okay, sure, I get that. But what about things like air pollution, right? Electromagnetic radiation from all our devices. We can't escape that stuff.
True, we can't eliminate everything, but Dr. Cardona does suggest ways to, attenuate that electromagnetic radiation. Yeah, so limiting screen time before bed, being mindful of where you put your Wi-Fi router, even thinking about the electromagnetic fields in your home or workspace.
Wow, I've got to admit, I've never even considered that.
But it makes sense, our bodies are bombarded with these invisible forces all the time.
It's a different level of awareness, for sure. It shows how sensitive our bodies are. Even small things can affect our health.
So we've covered diet, toxins. What about stress? Dr. Cardona really seems to think stress plays a huge role in cancer. Why is that?
He's all about those physiological impacts of stress, like how chronic stress can mess with our hormone balance,
Yeah.
suppress our immune system. And of course, we know chronic inflammation is like a breeding ground for cancer cells.
So stress just throws fuel on that fire.
Pretty much. And Dr. Cardona recommends this multifaceted approach to dealing with stress.
What does that mean? Multifaceted, like what, meditation, yoga?
Things like that, yeah. Deep breathing exercises, spending time in nature, getting enough sleep is huge, and just doing things you enjoy, you know? So, a more holistic approach, taking care of your mind and body. But is there actual scientific proof that reducing stress can really impact cancer risk?
Well, research is ongoing, but there are studies that show a connection, like chronic stress being linked to higher chances of certain cancers.
Interesting. So it's not just about feeling better, it's about making your body less hospitable to cancer. That actually reminds me of something you used before about Dr. Cardona's method being like, what was it? A reset button.
Yeah, for our epigenome.
Yeah.
Like we can take control, you know, maybe even reverse some of the damage.
Wow. That's a powerful concept. Really makes you think we're more in control of our health than we realize. But how much can we really change? Can you completely undo the effects of, let's say, years of bad habits?
That's the million-dollar question. And honestly, scientists are still figuring that out. We can't actually change our genes,
Yeah,
but
we can change how they're expressed.
exactly. By making those healthy choices, we're sending signals to our cells, encouraging them to work better.
So we're in constant communication with our genes through our lifestyle choices. Fascinating. But even if you're already dealing with cancer, Dr. Cardona thinks you can still make a difference.
That seems to be his point. It's not just about prevention. It's also about, like, taking an active role in your healing.
That's an important message. But let's be real for a second. Dr. Cardona's research, it's pretty unique. The mainstream medical world hasn't fully embraced this approach yet.
True. That's important to acknowledge. Listeners should definitely do their own research, talk to their doctors. It's about making informed decisions.
Exactly. We're laying out the information, giving you different perspectives. Now, I know Dr. Cardona is a big fan of coconut oil, those medium-chain saturated fatty acids, or AGSCMs. Why are those so special, and why the emphasis on goat and sheep dairy?
It's about how our bodies process those fats, those AGSCMs. They're used differently than the long-chain fatty acids.
Okay, but how?
Dr. Cardona says they give you energy without spiking your insulin levels. And that's especially important for people with cancer, since cancer cells love that sugar, that glucose.
So it's not just the type of fat, it's how it affects our metabolism, our blood sugar.
Interesting. But why goat and sheep dairy specifically? How are they different from cow's milk?
A few reasons. Goat and sheep milk naturally have more of those AGSCMs, and they're usually easier to digest for people who have trouble with cow's milk.
Oh, that makes sense.
They've also got different protein structures, which some people find less allergenic.
So it's about having options, finding what works for you. And speaking of options, we've talked a lot about Dr. Cardona's basic diet, but what does that actually look like?
It's all about creating that healthy gut microbiome, which, as we've discussed, is crucial for managing inflammation and keeping the immune system strong.
So lots of fiber, probiotics, that sort of thing.
Exactly. Whole, unprocessed foods, fiber-rich vegetables, fermented foods for those good bacteria, and lean protein. So it's not about restriction, it's about making choices that support your body's natural defenses. It sounds like a pretty solid foundation for health. We've covered so much in this deep dive, from the ins and outs of epigenetics to practical steps we can take to take control of our health. But before we wrap things up, I want to touch on doing your own research. Any resources or tips you'd recommend?
Well, there's a ton of information out there, but it's important to, be discerning. Look for credible sources.
Yeah, like what? Where should people start?
Reputable scientific journals,
Yeah.
university websites, organizations dedicated to health research. Those are good places to start.
And I imagine it can be overwhelming sifting through it all. Any advice for someone just starting to learn about epigenetics?
Start with the basics. Get familiar with the key terms like DNA methylation, histone modification.
Those sound complicated.
They are, but you can find explanations online. And don't be afraid to ask questions. It's a complex field, but it's worth the effort.
It's about staying curious, right?
Absolutely. The more we understand, the better choices we can make.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It really is a whole different way of thinking, isn't it? Like, we're not just stuck with the genes we inherit. We can actually influence them.
It's pretty remarkable. And, Dr. Cardona's research suggests that even if someone already has cancer, they can still make a difference by changing those external factors.
So it's not just about prevention, it's about potentially influencing the course of the disease, too. That's
Yeah.
huge. What's the big takeaway here for our listener, the one who sent in all of Dr. Cardona's research?
I think Dr. Cardona really wants us to rethink cancer. He's saying, listen, your lifestyle choices, they have power. not just to maybe prevent cancer, but maybe even, to affect how it progresses.
It's about taking an active role, not just relying on, well, whatever the standard treatments are.
Right. It's about understanding that we have more control than we maybe thought.
It's empowering, right, to know that our bodies are these dynamic systems, always responding to what's around us,
Hmm.
and that we can actually nudge those responses in the right direction.
Exactly. And this isn't just about cancer, right? This is about everything. Our health, our well-being. Epigenetics is showing us just how much our lifestyle choices affect how our genes get expressed.
And that directly impacts our health outcomes.
Wow, this has been a fascinating deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much. Any last thoughts for our listener before we wrap up?
Dr. Cardona's work really opens up a lot of possibilities. It makes us question what we thought we knew. It tells us to be curious, to explore these new ideas, to remember that we all have this potential to be healthier.
It's a call to action, right? Become informed, stay curious, and keep taking those steps, even small ones, towards better health. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We hope you found it as insightful as we did. Keep learning, keep exploring, and take care.